MMA Today for tomorrow. Today, we have a full fucking house. Of course, we got Tony Tone, Mr. Tone Loke, a.k.a. Wild Thing on Twitter. Big Tone.
I've been nice to everybody on Twitter today. I don't know what you're talking about.
Then also joining us, Max. What's going on, Max?
Glad to be here. Although I guess I missed the memo. It was Fitted Cap podcast day.
Yeah, and of course, MMA King, he returns. He graces us with his presence because, you know, he has to. He cannot leave us. You cannot, you know, go on your sabbatical anytime soon. What's going on, man?
Nothing much, man. It's good to be back after my little escapade last weekend where I was MIA, but let's do it.
And, of course, the new guy, the youngest member of the squad, the killer, the hippie hunter, Michael Fiedel. What's going on, man?
Nothing much. Great to be here. Happy to make a podcast debut.
Good. Looking forward to it. Now, of course, the first thing that I want to get into is Anthony Joshua's big news right now. Anthony Joshua is probably the biggest name in boxing, next to, you know, like Triple G and those guys. They're saying that Zuffa Boxing is going to offer him $500 million contract, right? What does that say? You know what I mean? Like, to me, they're kind of shitting on all the UFC fighters, man, because nobody even has $1 million contract, really. You know, that's very rare. And they're giving a boxer $500 million. And he's not even really a proven pay-per-view guy, I don't think. I don't know much about boxing, to be honest with you, so I'm just talking out my ass. So let me toss the mic to somebody that knows some boxing. Big Tone, break some shit down.
I would say AJ is, you know, a little. I mean, he's.
Are we fucking going to like friend names and shit? Like AJ, what's going on? Like you on fucking WhatsApp with them or something?
I mean, now that's what most people refer him to as in the boxing world that are in the know, like me. So yeah, AJ, he's drawn. He's shown to draw internationally in pay-per-views. Not so much, you know, in the U.S. Plus, with this last fight, you know, being at a really wonky time, U.S. because they did it local time in England, so it was airing during the middle of the day over here, morning to the middle of the day. But he's a draw for sure, and I think what the UFC or whoever the hell is behind this, WME, Dana White, what they're trying to do is kickstart a boxing promotion. If these rumors are true, and I can't think of a better name that's available, you know, to grab and help kickstart, you know, a boxing promotion than Anthony Joshua right now. Obviously, you can't go out and grab someone like Canelo, who's connected to Golden Boy. You're not going to be getting Floyd or any of those kinds of guys. You'd have to co-promote with their, you know, long-established promoters. So AJ's like that quasi kind of free agent that's available.
But what do you think about the whole, you know, like, it's connected to the UFC, right? So, like, what does that say about, you know, like the UFC fighters? What should a UFC fighter be thinking when they're offering all this money, but then they don't offer that money to their fighters, the UFC fighters? Is it separate from them, or is it connected to them, do you think?
I think they're treating it as, I mean, they're calling it Zuffa Boxing, so obviously it's disconnected. They're going to claim, you know, that they're completely, you know, different things. But I think when it comes down to it, it's the same company, WME, that's, you know, or Endeavor or whatever they're called, that's holding the cards here. So, I mean, it's definitely probably a shitty feeling for the fighters. I probably wish they had gone into boxing instead of MMA. Just like, you know, NBA players probably wish they had done baseball.
King, I have a big question for you. You know, when they sold this, Fertitta Brothers sold the UFC to WME or TBS or whatever the fuck the name is, Do you think they had a secret contract with the Fertitta brothers that they were gonna start a separate like entity in that company called Zuffa Boxing, and then the Fertitta brothers are gonna come back and they're gonna push that part of the business?
I mean, I wasn't in the room for these ones, like, unfortunately, but for these negotiations. But I think that, maybe. I think it's just kind of in general. I think it's just, to kind of build off of the question that you asked, Tone. I think it's, kind of just the reality of the two sports. The UFC, Zuffa controlled what MMA fighters were paid. Boxing had its own thing going where there were multiple different promotions that were able to kind of outbid each other, whatever. We can get into the whole, like, why boxers get paid more thing, but just kind of the way it is. I think we realized that when the sale went down and we saw how much money Zuffa sold the UFC for. So, I think that this specific instance, like, it's very specific, and it's obviously got the Zuffa tie-in, but at the same time, I feel like it shouldn't come to a surprise to any of these fighters, after they saw what exactly Zuffa sold the UFC for.
Max, do you think that Anthony Joshua is a $500 million athlete?
Man, that's a hefty price tag, and I don't know the sport quite as well as some of the others, but like Tone said, it's going to be tough for a new established boxing promotion to grab a guy who's already been established with some of those longtime promoters. But that being said, he seems to have a huge following. So if that's the price tag they want to stick on, and they believe he's the guy that's going to lead the charge for Zuffa Boxing, then by all means, snatch him up before someone else does.
Michael, he just stated that he has a huge following, right? When you go to school, does anybody talk about Anthony Joshua?
Yeah, I have a couple of friends who are super into boxing, and Anthony Joshua is one of the names that always comes up. Obviously, there's the potential super fight down the road with Deontay Wilder. I'm sure that would garner, I don't want to say great pay-per-view numbers, but it would certainly do well. It's bringing the heavyweight division back to somewhere it hasn't been before. But I think going back to if he's worth $500 million, if I'm a fighter on the UFC's payroll, this news is pushing me directly towards Project Spearhead or the MMA FA, whichever you decide to support. If I'm a UFC fighter, I'm saying, where's my cut? If Anthony Joshua, who's a boxer, is going to get $500 million to be the first of ever in terms of Zuffa Boxing, where's the money that's going to our pockets?
I got some numbers for you, John. The Joshua Klitschko pay-per-view did 1.5 million buys in the UK. In Germany, a total of 10.4 million people watched the fight. And here in the States, Showtime and HBO. Showtime aired it live. They got around 700,000 people watching in the middle of the day. And then HBO rebroadcast it at nighttime, prime time, and got about 750,000. So,
wow, those are pretty good numbers. It seems like that Zuffa is doing their due diligence on Anthony Joshua. Man, it's just a weird thing, man. Like, is Dana White going to leave the UFC? That was like my bold prediction of 2018 in the beginning, is that Dana White would leave the UFC and head Zuffa Boxing. Is he in control of Zuffa Boxing? Who's in control of that? Do you know, King?
WME owns Zuffa. They own Zuffa. Zuffa is WME. They bought everything.
So it doesn't really matter. Like, it's not like there's no compartments. It's like if Dana White is running the UFC, that means he's running Zuffa Boxing too?
Dana White is like a very small drop in the bucket of the giant billions of dollars of this company. So he's like not really a big player. I think that this move kind of almost solidifies the fact that Dana White's sticking around even.
Oh, with the UFC and the company, the whole entity.
I'm saying the direction. If they are trying to set up a boxing promotion, that just with WME, that just signals to me that they're trying to keep White on. Maybe he heads to boxing but leaves the UFC and someone else takes over the UFC. I don't know. That's all crazy speculation, but I'm just saying this this type of posturing, I think, just lends itself to the fact that Dana White's going to be around a lot longer with WME.
Well, Big Tone, you better put your application into the UFC so you could get a good job, you know, like get some money out of this thing.
Sounds like he already has.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. In the news, there's another important topic going on is with Josh Barnett. You know, he's a fighter that has been on the sidelines for, I think, around 2 years because of he popped hot. USADA, he took them to arbitration. He actually won. And now basically his 2 years of his career, and he's not like he's a young buck. You know, how old is Josh Barnett? In his mid-30s, right? And he's been fighting for how long? Like more than 15 years. So 2 years is a huge like hit to his pockets and to his reputation as a fighter. And the reason why is because he was busted for steroids before. So when you've been busted before and you get busted again, people are going to automatically think that you are guilty. But he wasn't guilty. Now, how does that affect Barnett? And do you think he returns to the UFC to fight? We'll start with you, King.
Yeah, I think he'll be back. I mean, he doesn't really have an option at this point. You know, he's still under contract with them. Like, what is he? You know, is he going to sit there and wait out? You know, this contract or try to get bought out? I don't think the UFC is going to be willing to let him go. Just you know, their heavyweight division is improving, but that's not necessarily saying a ton. You know, you still need those guys for some of your up and comers to build off of and to be able to have big fights against and be able to go to Japan or wherever. You know, Barnett, they had him headline there before. He's a guy that people know. So I think he'll stick around. I think, you know, the precedent of this whole thing, in my opinion, falls on the supplement company. You know, USADA, we can argue about what their role is or whatever, but at the same time, what they didn't do anything, in my opinion, that was out of what they're expected to do. You know, they tested for something. Josh Barnett tested positive for it. So that's all on the you know, the supplement company, in my opinion. There's a reason they put labels on things, and that's exactly why, is so that any type of issues down the road, you know, it's simple. Either it's on the label or it's not. So we'll see what happens, but I think we'll see the War Master back.
Now, I want to go to Michael and get his point of view on this. Michael, since Josh Barnett has USADA by the balls, does he juice his tits off and come back and just destroy the heavyweight division?
Well, I don't know. First, you have to say, can he do that? Can he come back and devastate the heavyweight division, which at his age, with the amount of damage he's taken, I'm not sure if that's necessarily a lock. But I saw something really interesting on Twitter, on Dave's Twitter page. I'm no expert in steroids, but he is performance-enhancing drugs. I don't want to mischaracterize anything. And he was saying that in addition to all the time that Barnett has been out, he also has to serve the 6 months because he has to go back into the testing pool. So I think it's a while before we see the War Master back in the octagon.
Max, when he comes back, does his body look like mashed potatoes?
It very well could. I mean, he has been out for quite a while, and I know he's been doing some professional wrestling, so not to speculate or anything, but that's an industry that's also known to be tied to performance-enhancing drugs. But going back to what Dr. King said, a lot of good matchups for him in the UFC if he is able to return, because you think about this second stint he's had with the UFC since Strikeforce folded, those guys aren't really in the top 10 anymore. Travis Brown's outside the top 10. Frank Mir's out of the organization. Ben Rothwell's suspended. A lot of fresh faces and fresh matchups for Josh Barnett should he come back.
Tone, what do you think about Barnett? Who, you know, they're talking about fresh matchups and all this stuff. Do you think they're going to use him to kind of propel somebody in the division? Because they do need new faces at the top. And who do you think that they could kind of match him up with to kind of, you know, to elevate the division a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's how you have to use him now. He's a name that's 40 years old and, you know, in his 40s and way past his prime. So that's the obvious way to use him. I think I saw him last year when he was coaching in the corner of one of his fighters, Alyssa Garcia, who actually made it over to Ryzen last year as well. But he's in good shape. I've seen him. He's in fine shape. He hasn't like let himself go like Frank Mir did when he was out. I do think the whole situation was a little ridiculous, and I am on the team hashtag fuck USADA, so I might be a little bit biased, but they had him sit out for forever basically, and now they want him to re-enter the testing pool and all this shit. Like, this is just not cool how they treat fighters and how they destroy lives. So I'm not down with all that. But I think a good matchup for him would be Curtis Blades. I like Curtis Blades. Obviously, he's building his name. He just fought Mark Hunt. Throw him Josh Barnett. See what happens.
Definitely. Now, going back to something that is, breaking in the world of MMA, which is probably one of the, you could argue it is the most stacked division in the UFC, which is the welterweight division. And a lot of solid matchups are like forming right now, right? The first one I want to get into is the UFC Chile headliner, which is his name Ponzinibbio versus Usman, right? Now, Ponzinibbio, a.k.a. Pinocchio, that's what Mike Perry likes to call him, and that's what I like to call him too because that's a great name. I think that should be his nickname. They should call him that from now on. But anyways, what do you think of this matchup? Do you think that this is just like we'll start with you, Michael. Do you think that this matchup is just kind of like a showcase for Usman?
Well, I'm not sure I'd call it a showcase for Usman. The first thing right off the bat is that it's in Chile, and Santiago Ponzinibbio is a Latin American fighter, so it's a homecoming of sorts.
Are you Latin American?
No, I'm not.
Oh, no, I thought because you said it's like Chile. I thought I thought you were trying to show off to us.
No, sorry.
Go ahead.
But
Rookie
I also think it's a fight of two guys who didn't get the Darren Till fight. Kamaru Usman was clamoring for the fight on Twitter. Santiago Ponzinibbio was a name that's floated as well. So it's two guys who are right in the thick of things in the division. So I think it's a great fight overall.
Should Usman had a better matchup, do you think, Tone? Do you think that this is a kind of like a shitty matchup for him?
Not at all. Ponzinibbio is probably he is the most dangerous guy this dude's faced. And if anyone has, that puncher's chance versus him, I think it's him. Usman, what is he going to show up with? Is he going to show up with the 20%, 30%, 40%? Like, we don't know what kind of Usman we're getting. His style is really not fan pleasing, even though we have seen performances in the past where he's decided to just dominate and go for the kill. But his last fight, man, just did not show that. And maybe it was just an injury. This is a chance for him to prove, that he can be that guy. He can be exciting. Because you have a fight that gets hyped up like his last one, and you perform like that, and the comments that are made, there's a black mark right now, and he kind of needs to clear that up. And if he just goes out there and wrestle fucks Ponzinibbio for 5 rounds, man, he's not gonna have any fans left. Like no fan, except for those MMA hipsters that love the ground game. I love the ground game. I love Tyron Woodley and Wonder Boy too. It's so amazing.
Max, is Ponzinibbio a rich man's Mike Perry?
I've never actually thought about that, but I kind of like it. I kind of like that description there. Both these guys riding huge win streaks, and like Michael said, Ponzinibbio is actually from Argentina, which is a neighboring country of Chile. So expect him to have Chile. Yeah. Expect him to have a big crowd behind him. This is a great fight. I don't really know who to pick just yet, but like Tone said, we could see another Kamaru Usman lay prey outing, or who knows? Ponzinibbio has that puncher's chance. I mean, he's proven it before, and why not do it again?
Yeah, lay in prey, wall install, the human blanket. Those are all descriptions that nobody wants to be called at all. Nobody wants to be described as that type of fighter, right? So, King, does he come out here with a different game plan and just decide to bang it out with Ponzinibbio? Do you see that might happen? Because he is from a camp that is mainly strikers.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't if I were him. I think I've said this before when we've previewed Ponzinibbio's fights. Like, I think he'll fight for a belt at some point. I'm a big fan of him and how the way that he operates. I think the things that he does are so, like, he's so technically sound. And for Usman, I think that the key to victory here, I'm not sure who's going to win. I don't want to make a prediction on this bout until we get there, but I think that Usman's not going to want to stand and strike with him. I think he's just too technical of a boxer. And now, he's always had that power. Now he's starting to put his hands together, get a more well-rounded game. So for me, I think this is great matchmaking. You really could have taken – I don't remember a time where there were so many fighters in one division that all didn't have matchups and were all ready to fight. Like, we just had, 4 top-tier welterweight matchups all announced in the same, short period of time. So I can't wait, man. I think the welterweight division is going to have some serious contenders going on, come 3 or 4 months from now.
Yeah, speaking of great matchups, there's a few more fights in the welterweight division that are in the works. They're not really official yet. The first one that we can talk about is the Darren Till versus Stephen Wonderboy Thompson fight, which is a fight that I'm pretty sure if you're an MMA fan, you are going to watch this live, right? Now, I'm going to start with you, Tone. In this fight, both of these guys are strikers. One's a karate guy. He's the fucking Karate Kid, right? His dad calls him WB. I've got sources. His dad calls him WB, and he calls his dad. Guess what he calls his dad? WD. You know what I mean? Which is corny as shit, but it's true. What do you think about this matchup? And his headlining is 5 rounds. Is it like how long it's gonna take Darren Till to knock out Wonderboy Thompson, or is it Wonderboy Thompson that has the striking advantage?
I think this fight is dangerous as fuck for the UFC to make. Like, I mean, you got Darren Till in his hometown headlining. It's a huge, I mean, all the eyes are going to be on him, all the hometown fans coming off that big win over Cowboy Cerrone, who, I mean, hindsight's 20/20, but I know a lot of us, including me at the time, looked at the tape and thought he would do well in that fight. And this one, you can't, it's harder to make that case, Wonderboy is not old. He's not like past his prime. He's not been in too many fights. His chin is not suspect. These are all kind of issues that were coming up with Cowboy. And 5 rounds with Wonderboy, even with like his inflated, ridiculous kickboxing record that's kind of fake, he's still dangerous as fuck. We saw him completely, nullify Masvidal's game, who's, a much, much, much better boxer than Till is. Till obviously has, more kicking to his arsenal, but man, it's tough. It's a tough spot to be in. I thought they would have given him someone, a lot easier, to be honest, in this matchup, in this spot. But we'll have to see. I don't think it's official yet, so we'll have to see how this all plays out. I think it's been confirmed by a lot of people, though, that heard the same thing that Chris Taylor, BJ Penn heard. So looking like it's more than likely to happen.
Dr. King, if you look at Wonderboy's last fight against Masvidal, right, it almost looked like after those 2 beatdowns from Tyron Woodley, he kind of seems like he's playing it a little bit safe now. Like he's being more selective of like who he wants to fight. Do you think that will be something that will be his downfall, or something that will propel him into another title shot?
I think it's all right. I've come to realize that a lot of times guys, picking matchups isn't the worst thing in the world. I think if there's obviously somebody out there that's trying to, fight all the bottom tier guys or something just to rack up wins, that's different than, A guy being, Thompson apparently didn't want this fight for a while. He didn't think like Till deserved it. And I kind of see his point. If you watch Darren Till prior to the Cerrone fight and then the Cerrone fight happened, like, for me, I never would have expected him to be a top 15 fighter, for at least 3-4 more fights. He had a fight against Bojan Velikovic right before the Cerrone one. And for me, it was a close fight. And Velikovic, all power to him. He's not, a top 15 guy. And Till struggled with him, and that was less than a year ago. So for me, I understand where Thompson's coming from. We've seen, in recent memory, top-tier fighters take, fights against these lower-tier guys where they don't really have much to gain. And then all of a sudden they end up getting, deaded. Like Ricardo Lamas got deaded by Josh Emmett. There was one recently that I'm just like blanking on, but that I always compare to. But yeah, obviously Till, a lot of buzz about him now. He's, got the name recognition. So I think, Till's kind of built himself into this fight with Wonderboy. And I think Wonderboy's okay with it now that Till is a name and clearly the UFC is pushing him. And that is a big fight now. And was one win that made the transformation between nothing and something.
Max, is Darren Till overhyped like fish and chips?
Dude, going after the Brit and his home country, man, that's ruthless. Overhyped, man. We gotta see. We really don't know yet, but he is in position where it's a huge test for him. We came on this podcast last week and we talked about some potential options, guys that were fringe top 10s, guys like Neil Magny, or those even outside the top 15, like I think you mentioned Tarek Safadine, Dong Hyun Kim, some of those guys that would actually kind of allow him to build that following that Nolan just referenced there, to give him a couple more wins under his belt before a huge headliner. But no, they're throwing him in against Wonderboy, who's two-time title challenger, still up the top of the welterweight ranks. This is where he's going to be able to prove himself if he is ready to take that next step towards the title.
Michael, with this matchup, it's like Tone said, I also believe that it is a dangerous, dangerous fight for the UFC to make, because this could destroy the hype of Darren Till with one fucking kick to the face. And then that fucking Liverpool crowd, if Wonderboy wins, does he make it out of Liverpool alive, Michael?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see a Kobe Covington in Brazil type dynamic when Covington beat Damian Maia, but I do think it is a very risky fight for the UFC to make. It's Darren Till in his hometown, and typically you would have him build like we were talking about, but instead they're feeding him right to the lions. They're giving him Stephen Thompson, and I think we've glazed over Stephen Thompson outclassed Rory McDonald for 5 rounds, and Rory McDonald's arguably the best welterweight in the world, depending on who you ask. So Stephen Thompson is no joke. The 2 fights with Woodley aside, one arguably you could debate the tie, the loss, the win, but Stephen Thompson's no joke. And for the UFC to give Darren Till to Stephen Thompson, it shows how much faith they have in him and how much they think he could be the next big thing.
All right, moving along. The third fight that is in the works is the RDA versus Colby Covington fight for the interim welterweight title. I think most people are just mad about that whole interim welterweight title part. That's about it. They're not really mad about the matchup. I think it's a good matchup for both fighters. In my opinion, I believe RDA runs through Covington easily. I don't think Covington has a chance. They should have gave Covington somebody easier to fight to build him a little bit more. We'll start with you, King. RDA, how would he lose this fight? Because I don't see it.
I mean, I think just the way that everybody else that fought Colby Covington did. It's just, we talked about Wallenstall, wet blanket, and I don't. That's the only route to victory here. I don't expect Covington to do anything different. I'm sure Dos Anjos is thinking the same thing that I'm thinking right now, that's probably what's going to end up happening when the two of them get in there. So it'll be an interesting matchup, because I think, the Maia fight was kind of a weird one. I was, weird matchup because Maia, you think ground, you know, so you think Covington, you think ground. So he bested a guy in the whole aspect of MMA's ground game. So now he's getting in there with another elite guy, you know, the second elite guy that he's fought, and it's a totally different stylistic matchup. So can his striking, which has gotten better but is not great, can it hold up against a guy like Rafael dos Anjos, who has been on an absolute tear, who's just, you know, I won't say reinvented because he never really truly left. I think it's become evident that the weight cut might have been part of his problems, but you know, man, I think it's a great matchmaking. The fact that it's in Brazil adds like a whole nother fun element, and you know, maybe it's a Covington fight that I can look forward to.
Max, what do you think of RDA? Do you think that he will end up like Cowboy Cerrone? He's gonna run into the wall of the welterweight division, and is Colby Covington the guy to do this?
Colby Covington is not the guy that's going to stop RDA in this situation. Like you said, it seems on paper that it's a very favorable matchup for Rafael dos Anjos. Man, I thought for sure in his last fight against Robbie Lawler that was going to be the wall he ran into, but man, he passed that test with flying colors. He deserves that number one contender status, number one contender fight, and Colby Covington has put together this impressive streak too. So the winner should be getting a crack at the UFC welterweight champion. It should not be a interim title fight though, and I do feel strongly about that. Tyron Woodley defended the belt 4 times, or at least had 4 title fights the previous 12 months, but now because he takes 8 months off for shoulder surgery, all of a sudden they gotta have an interim title fight. That just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Can I bring something up here that I thought was interesting? There's a couple of discussions that I saw go on Twitter this week. You know, because I'm on board with you, Max. I think, you know, what is the point of an interim belt at this point? It's like, you know, just nonsense. But I did see 2 things that were interesting. One was people saying that, you know, obviously you get the 5 rounds. So, you know, are you okay with, you know, having these interim fights, knowing that these fights that otherwise, you know, in a co-main event slot a big fight can still be 5 rounds? That's the first thing. And then the second thing they were saying was, about fighter pay, that it ups the pay of these guys that may or may not, you know, deserve more money because they're big names, but in a 3-round fight on a pay-per-view, they might not get that. So those are just 2 things to think about. I'm not really sure how I feel about it. I think interim's kind of still BS, but I thought that was an interesting take.
Rename them then. Rename them to number one contender fights instead of interim. Conor McGregor hasn't defended his belt in God, what, 1,000 fucking days? What are we going on now? And they're just now doing an interim fight, and they won't even strip him until both of the guys get in the octagon. They're refusing to strip him until Ferguson and Khabib get in the octagon. So this is just insane, especially considering the fact that Woodley was the most active champion from 2016 to 2017, I believe. So this whole situation is just bullshit. And then, you know, I don't have a problem with, you know, obviously I think Covington and RDA are the 2 top contenders, so that's not a problem at all. And I do like Nolan's point of you get the 5 rounds in the co-main event, because otherwise it'd be 3 rounds. And I'm all for more 5-round fights. Definitely more fighting is always good. But I don't know. I don't think. I don't have any faith in RDA being able to stop a Colby Covington takedown. I think we saw Safadine take him down in their fight, and in RDA's defense, that was his first fight at 170. And honestly, Colby's probably not the biggest, you know, 170 out there either. So I mean that it's also another something else for RDA, you know, to think about. You know, probably not, you know, size wise that at that big of a disadvantage, but. Man, I'm not picking against Colby Covington again, even though I hate the guy personally. I won't pick against him.
Yeah, it seems like Conor McGregor has WME in some panties right now, because they're very careful of what they say and what they do. One last question about this matchup to Michael. Michael, Covington, he beat a grappler, Damian Maia. What makes RDA different from Damian Maia, like as a grappler, that will win him this fight, do you think?
Well, I think that obviously Damian Maia is about as accomplished as you could possibly be in the world of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And Rafael dos Anjos, while being no slouch, doesn't touch those accolades. But what Rafael dos Anjos does do is he mixes in a degree of wrestling and a degree of striking that diversifies his attack and makes him a much more viable threat in those two areas than Damian Maia was. So I think it allows him to get to the ground in a better position, and it allows him to keep it standing if he wants to. So while Rafael dos Anjos is not the grappler that Damian Maia is, he has enough grappling and better wrestling and striking so that he can dictate the pace of the fight and I think control the outcome.
All right, I would like to get some early predictions on these fights. Let's go through them. Ponzinibbio versus Usman, Till versus Wonderboy, and RDA versus Covington. We'll start with you. Just say who you think is going to win. We'll start with King.
Ponzinibbio, Wonderboy, and RDA.
Big Tone?
Usman, Till, Colby.
Max? What'd you say?
Sign language?
Michael?
Oh, wait, yo, is I muted?
Sorry, yeah, it was pause for a second. I'll go with Usman over Ponzinibbio, Thompson over Till, and RDA over Kobe Covington.
All right, Max.
Was I muted? Is that what happened?
Yeah, you muted.
Oh, sorry about that. I'm going to go Usman, Wonderboy, and RDA, Dos Anjos.
All right, coming up, we got Bellator 196, Benson Henderson versus Roger Huerta. I think that's the only fight that we could really talk about in this because the other fights, either they're kickboxing or really not very popular matchups, you know, in the world of MMA, I think. But I don't know what you guys think, but I'm saying, like, we should probably just start with Henderson versus Huerta. Huerta, does he return? I think he returns to Bellator, or is this his debut?
He's fought for every organization in the world.
Yes. So Roger Huerta, he used to be, like, if you don't know, the poster boy for the UFC, and then he washed out and went to every other promotion, like Tone said, in the world. And now he returns to Bellator against Benson Henderson. This is an interesting fight. The reason why is because these are some big names. Benson Henderson, of course, former UFC and WEC lightweight champion. Roger Huerta, he's just been everywhere. He is the ultimate journeyman, right? Roger Huerta. But he's still a big name. So people are interested in what is going to happen in this fight. Now we're going to start with you, Tone. What do you think of this matchup? Is this a good matchup for Huerta? Because in his last fight, he got elbowed in the head 50 million times.
No, this is a terrible matchup for him. I think, you know, Benson Henderson needs to get back in the fucking win column, though. He has been on just a horrendous, losing streak since. And I mean, honestly, it could, or maybe, you know, would have been a 4-fight losing streak if Patricio Pitbull's leg doesn't give out on him. He's lost to Koreshkov, Chandler, and the other Pitbull brother now in Bellator since coming over from the UFC. And that guy just needs a good, solid win. And I can't imagine a better opponent to do that against than the ghost of Roger Huerta. There is some, I mean, the card isn't like completely devoid of, you know, entertaining fights. There's the Denise Kielholtz and Lena Ovchenko. I'm not even going to try to say her name, but you guys know who I'm talking about from the women's flyweight division. And then Ed Ruth is on the card as well. And the Bellator kickboxing card is actually pretty solid as well.
Well, Michael, what can you tell me about Henderson? You know, like Tone said, he hasn't had the best career so far for Bellator. Is he on the decline?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that Benson Henderson is not going to recapture the glory that he had back in WEC or early on in the UFC. I think there is certainly a decline. But if you look at the names he's lost to in Bellator, they're razor-thin, split decision losses for the most part to some of the top flight guys in the division. So I think Benson Henderson can get right back on track here. He can do it in the main event. And then rounding out the card, I got to say, I feel for Adam Borix. He was supposed to be headlining the event against James Gallagher. Gallagher got hurt. By the way, this is in his hometown, or home country, I should say. He loses the gap of his life, and then he loses his late-term replacement as well. So I feel for Borix. And then I'm psyched about the Ed Ruth fight, I got to say.
What is so exciting about Ed Ruth, though?
Well, for me, I'm a Penn State wrestling fan, so Ed Ruth back in the cage. It's great to see a Penn State alumnus. And I think that the Bellator signing of some of these top flight wrestling prospects just shows how committed they are to building a stable of young up-and-comers. And I think that these wrestlers can translate into MMA stars just as they were on the mats.
Max, when you look at this Roger Huerta being signed, do you think that's just like Bellator being desperate?
Yeah, a little bit, to be honest. They, like Michael said, they lost their headliner, James Gallagher, who's the big draw there, and then they kind of need something to fill the void. And Roger Huerta fought in every organization you can think of. He's got a big name out there. And Benson Henderson, obviously the former UFC champion, former WEC champion, still has that big name. To me, it seems like kind of a last-minute headliner on paper that you can get away with.
Dr. King, man, if you look at this, it's a replacement main event. Benson Henderson is fighting Roger Huerta. Is the promotion giving Benson Henderson a layup? Like, kind of like, hey, here's a fight you can win against a guy with the name. Also, Huerta hasn't fought at 155 in a while, it seems. So what do you think of that?
Oh, I think they are. It's for better or worse, that's kind of what's happening here. He's just has enough of a name and has just not been, I don't want to say washed up, but has just not struggled enough for them to justify this. Like, he's had a couple wins in a row, one against the UFC vet and Hyder Hassan, who's, again,
he got DQ'd.
Was it? Okay. Well, so yeah, to answer your question, I think that's all you kind of really need to know. Don't think I can go much more in depth.
Joining us from England, he's wearing a gi, it looks like. Ben Smith, what's going on?
I'm well, mate. Yourself?
Are you? Oh, I thought you were wearing a gi. I thought you were wearing a blue gi. I was like, I thought you were dressed up for the event, but you are wearing a.
No,
is that a soccer jersey?
It is indeed. It is. Yeah.
Okay.
What are those headphones? Those look like something you check out of the library.
What are those?
Library? Are you kidding? These are like £300. Well, that's like $400, I guess, to you.
That looks worse than what Bryson was wearing during the podcast.
I haven't
anyways,
seen this.
Ben, it's good to talk to you, man. You give the English perspective. We're just discussing the Benson Henderson versus Roger Huerta matchup. What do you think about that?
I think it's a bit of a gimme matchup for Henderson, really. I mean, we say there about Henderson's bad form, but really, Huerta's not been much better himself, and against nowhere near the caliber of names that Henderson's fought. I mean, in terms of the main event, it's not the best main event you could have hoped for, but I mean, what can you really expect from a replacement like that?
Now, Bellator, they're like going to all these like obscure locations. I don't know if it's obscure locations, but like locations where you would never expect events to be happening. Do you think that that's what Bellator's like gimmick is now? They're going to these places. Like next, they're gonna have a show in Mongolia and they're gonna have a show in like Vladivostok and like they're gonna go to North Korea eventually soon. Is that what you think, Big Toe? That's what Bellator is heading towards?
I think they're trying to hit spots that the UFC isn't hitting. It's kind of blatant, and I think this is not the first time that they've been to Hungary.
It's not, yeah.
Yeah, they've been there before. I just I don't understand why it's taking them so long to go to Brazil. They are supposed to go to Brazil later this year, is what the rumors are. Nolan probably knows more about that than I do. But man, you have the Pitbull brothers and quite a few other Brazilian talent. I don't know why you haven't gone there yet. And the country hopping, is getting a little bit out of control. Like they kind of have been hitting the same spots for a couple years. So I think they're trying to grow something in each of those different spots. But you got to kind of figure out which spots are working and which aren't, and kind of cut your losses. I think Italy is a good scene for them. They can co-promote out there. Obviously, kickboxing's big out there. And we'll see, which countries pan out for them in the end.
Israel killed it for them too, apparently.
Yeah, Israel's another one. They have Noad Lahat, obviously, who's a big name in Israeli MMA.
It's weird that they don't go to, like, they're not doing any shows in Asia, and Scott Coker, he's half Korean too. So that doesn't, and Richard Chow, he's some Asian form. I don't know what kind.
Are you calling him a traitor?
No, I'm just saying, like, if you're Asian, like, come on, hook the Asians up. What's going on with the,
I'll let him know next time I see him.
Yeah, when you see him, you'd be like, hey, you really Asian? You repping? Where's your fucking flag, man?
His girlfriend's full on Asian, I'll tell you that.
Well, it doesn't matter about girlfriends. It's about, like, what's inside of you, But anyways, yeah, Bellator, that show, I don't think people are really interested so much into, like, the other matchups. Of course, the kickboxing, people are interested in that, but we're not going to talk about that because we don't talk about that really. And let's move on.
What, you're not going to give a shout out to Raymond Daniels? Come on.
Okay, shout out to Raymond Daniels and
Raymond
and
Daniels took Wonder Boy to task.
Yeah,
John Wayne
Parr, he's going to be on there. Other than that, I don't really know.
You guys keep saying he's on that card, but I have not seen him listed anywhere.
No, that's what everybody says. Everybody's saying that John Wayne Parr is on that card.
I think he is.
Yeah.
Is he?
Yeah.
He might not be, but I think he is. I think he's going for the 100th win.
That is so weird. I have a press release from Bellator, and he is not on there.
Well, I just talked to Brian Moore, who's fighting on that card.
Yeah.
From SBG, and he told me John Wayne Parr is on that card.
All right. Yeah. I mean, it's just weird that it's not being advertised.
On March 27th, there was a tweet about it.
Oh, okay.
Yesterday.
From Bellator Kickboxing. Yes.
You mean yesterday?
Also known as yesterday.
Okay, so maybe it's happening, maybe it's not. Maybe John Wayne Parr is just gonna show up, drink some beers, and kick some ass. Who knows what's
I don't doubt he could. He probably could. Shit.
Yeah, that'd be awesome if they would do a special matchup where they have to take shots before every round and then they fight and to see what happens.
It might make it fair for John Wayne Parr's opponents if they had to do that.
Yeah, probably. All right, now let's move on to the biggest card, I think, of this year, because there hasn't been any card as big, it seems like. So, UFC 223, there's going to be 2 title fights. The supposedly lightweight title fight in the main event, and then we got the co-main event, which is the strawweight title fight between Rose Namajunas and Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Outside of those 2 fights, we will talk about them, of course, but let's talk about what fight each of you guys are looking forward to most. Like, which one fight? And I want you guys to break down that fight. We'll start with you, Max.
All right, outside those 2 big fights, the fight I'm looking forward to most is, I believe it's the curtain jerk of the evening, to beat Magomed Sharipov and Kyle Bochniak. That's one heck of a fight right there. Those 2 guys come to fight. It's to beat, a huge prospect, a huge up-and-coming talent out of the Northeast. And, man, he's someone to watch in that division. Kyle Bochniak, Nolan can talk a little bit more about him, but he impressed me a lot in his last fight. He showed a lot of growth in his abilities and his skill set. And every time out, no matter who his opponent is, he's going to try to knock your head off. So that's going to be one to watch for me at least.
All right, we'll move on to Michael. What do you think will be the one that you're most your juices will flow?
For me, it's Paul Felder, Al Iaquinta. I think that's got ridiculous violence potential. We could see some knees, elbows. We could see some great striking on display. And the return of Al Iaquinta. What more can you say?
Tone, do you think that this matchup versus this matchup in the featherweight division, Artem Lobov versus Alex Caceres, is that the one that gets your juices flowing?
Fuck no. Not at all. No. I mean, I think it'll be fun. You got wild spinning shit in Caceres, and I mean, if you haven't seen him, he's been involved in some Kimbo Slice style street fights, so that's always fun to go watch those whenever he shows up on a UFC card for nostalgic purposes. But I don't think that's going to be exciting. I mean, I don't think it's going to be like the highlight, of the undercard or anything. My fight to watch is I feel like I'm kind of cheating because it's the third fight on the card, but it's Calvin Kattar and Hanato. God damn, I hate saying this guy's name.
Carnero?
Moicano.
It's Moicano, right? Moicano, yeah. Moicano really, I think, surprised a lot of people in the Jeremy Stephens fight. He managed to deal with the pressure of Jeremy Stephens, and his footwork was just amazing. Lost to Brian Ortega doesn't look so bad, not now that we've seen what Brian Ortega's gone on to do. And Calvin Kattar, man, just came off that gigantic fucking win over Shane Burgos, and his striking is just so crisp. The combinations he puts together, his boxing is just some of the best we've seen in that division. So he's someone that I'm definitely looking forward to seeing again after that performance in Boston. Yeah, that's my fight to watch. Sorry if I stole that from anybody.
We're taking all the King's Boston guys. You only got Joe Lozon and with Mike Rodriguez.
That was probably going to be King's, I bet.
Actually, mine was going to be Felder and Iaquinta, but because I don't report biased, I'm not a biased reporter, so I don't know. We'll have to check out what your morals are going forward. But anyways. So I was going to pick Felder Iaquinta, but the fact that that's already taken, to talk about a fight that's new, maybe people don't know about it as much, would be Mike Rodriguez versus Devin Clark. I think that's a good fight too. Another local guy. I guess I am biased, but I think it's an interesting matchup because, like these other Contender Series guys, they're not giving Rodriguez an easy fight. Like, Clark stylistically is not a good matchup necessarily, and he's got the experience factor. He's not somebody that's had one or two fights in the UFC. He's had a handful, so I think that's a good one. And if Rodriguez wins, it's probably going to be by some type of violent, highlight reel knockout, which is what he's known for.
Yeah, this Rodriguez versus Clark fight, it's the only fight in the light heavyweight division on this card, and the only fight above the lightweight division. All the fights on this card, except for this one, are all 155ers and below. A lot of featherweight fights. It's really interesting that they made a card like this. And there's a lot of great matchups, man. It's like a lot of guys that are on the fringe are fighting each other, and then a lot of top 10 guys are fighting each other. There's not really any boring fight here.
Artem Lobov is on this card.
What's up?
Artem Lobov is on this card.
But I'm saying, but that's not a boring fighter, though. Artem Lobov, he'll stand there and get kicked in the face over and over. He's like that guy on, a video game that you can't beat because he just doesn't go down. But the thing about him, it's there's always there's interesting matchups here. Even the Ashley Evans Smith versus Beck Rawling at flyweight. That's an interesting matchup for the division, I believe, right? Whoever wins kind of elevates themselves into fighting somebody in the division, even fighting a Shevchenko or something like that. You know what I mean? Who knows? But Ben, the guy from England, you still there?
I'm the. So like, mine would have been the Cater fight. I think that's a real 50-50. But past that, I'm probably looking at Carolina Herry because I feel like everyone's so adamant on Carolina winning this fight. I don't think they're really giving Herrig enough credit. I mean, she's on what, a 4-fight win streak now. Just beating Alexa Grasso in the past. I mean, she's beaten some pretty legit people, and I really don't want to rule her out of an upset win over Caroline. So I'm interested to see how that one pans out.
Yeah, John, another fight flying under the radar. Olivier Aubin-Mercier stepping in, taking on Evan Dunham. Both guys coming on win streaks here. Will Dunham, an unbeaten streak. He had to draw in his last outing, but that should be a good one, really showcase where Aubin-Mercier, if he's ready to kind of take that next step towards facing the top 15 guy.
Really, man, the top to bottom, you could watch this card from the beginning all the way to the main event, and you should be entertained by what you see. Now let's just move on to the co-main event. Rose Namajunas versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk. It is the rematch. Rose shocked a lot of people when she knocked out Joanna in their last fight, got the title, and then she came out and basically she's the anti-Joanna, right? She comes out and says that she just be nice to each other, right? Like that, right? So in this fight, do you see this fight going the same way as it did in the first fight? Or do you see Joanna coming out and getting revenge and knocking out Rose Namajunas? We'll start with you, King.
You know, was I muted? Am I good? So yeah, I almost pulled a max there, but I didn't. So one in the me column. But anyways, yeah, I you know, the first fight, I don't know if it was an accurate representation of what's going to transpire in this one. It's so hard to tell. I think this is such an interesting fight. You know, in terms of WMMA, this is, you know, forget about Ronda Rousey for a second. This is one of the fights that's maybe intrigued me the most. You know, I just think it's a phenomenal matchup, and I think we're really going to see what the truth is. You know, for me, Rose tagged her, you know, multiple times in that fight, which makes me not think that it's not a fluke. At the same time, was Joanna just having an off night? You know, did she get caught the first time, and then from there on out, it was just, you know, she couldn't recover mentally or physically or whatever. So I honestly don't know what we're going to see, but I think that's what makes me want to watch it.
Big Tone, does Joanna show up on fight night with a bald head versus bald head violence? Is that what's going to happen?
That would be funny. I would be, you know, on board with that. She's had the braided hair for quite some time though. I do like that Joanna switched it up and went with I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but it's Melee, the nutritionist. I hope I'm doing that name.
Tyler
justice.
Melee Mitten, yeah.
Yeah. And I think he's done a really good job with some other fighters. And I'm glad to see her switching things up a little bit. And she posted a picture, you know, saying she's 122.5 pounds, 10 days out from the fight today. So that's good to see as well. I don't think her weight will be an issue at all, even if, you know, maybe she does need to go to 125 if she loses this fight. But, you know, I'm more interested in this fight than the main event because I feel like I know what's going to happen in the main event, even if I'm dead ass wrong. In this fight, I have no clue what's going to happen. I'm not even going to pretend to act like I you know, can pick somebody here. So it's a lot more interesting to me in that sense. And you know, maybe I think one thing I think that we will see is more of Rose's grappling. You know, like most 115-pound women or just women's MMA in general, she doesn't rely on, like, you know, single leg or double leg takedowns. It's all about the throws and back, you know, sneaky back takes. She does that very well, and that was on full display when she fought Michelle Waterson, who was supposed to be this great grappler, and Rose dominated her in the grappling department. I know Joanna's been extremely hard to take down, but you know, anything, you know, happened with these two, and you know, maybe Joanna's so you know, worried about the striking, you know, with the last result that she gets taken down, and then we see that brown belt jiu-jitsu go to work.
Michael, did Rose get lucky in the first fight, and in their rematch, is Joanna gonna come out and eat her face?
Well, I don't necessarily think she got lucky. I think she and her team put together a great game plan. They saw holes in the game that they came to expose, and she won the fight fair and square. I don't think it was necessarily a lucky shot. I think she found the hole in the plan she wanted to exploit, and she did so. But I got to side with Tone on this one. I have no idea how this one's going to go down.
Max, what do you think about, you know, Joanna changing everything up? She's been successful for so long, you know what I mean? Her blaming other people for her performance in the cage. Mentally, is that going to affect her in this second fight?
Gotta think so. Like you said, changing everything up after how many successful title defenses, it's going to be a change, but that just goes to show I think she's taking this fight very seriously. And that first Rose Namajunas loss at UFC 217 took a lot out of her. That was just a one-sided official win, and it was not – I agree with Michael. It wasn't lucky. She put together a great game plan, and she executed, put her out in the first round. Joanna needs to make adjustments if she wants to be able to win this fight.
Ben, is everybody in Europe drinking tea and eating crumpets and rooting for Joanna Jędrzejczyk to win this fight?
To be honest, like she lost a lot of popularity after the first fight. Not just because she lost, we're not all quite that fickle, but more the fact that she was, as you say, like blaming it on other people. I think if she is to have success in this rematch, she needs to take like an evaluation of herself, admit where she went wrong, look at the flaws in the game, and actually work on those, as opposed to saying that she either got lucky or blaming it on other people. I think she needs to evaluate her own game and come back stronger.
Do you think that she's going to come back stronger, or is her changing everything in such a short period of time going to affect her negatively?
I mean, much like Michael and Tone, I wouldn't believe anybody that says they know which way this fight's going to go, because it's honestly the biggest 50-50 I've ever known. I have a sneaky feeling Joanna may do it, but I certainly would be betting on it. I think changing things up, I think she's got a personality where it'll actually suit her, rather than playing on her mind that she changed things from being successful. I think she'll more view it as a clean slate and to go on to bigger and better things.
So basically, you're going to take Joanna because she is from Europe?
No, not at all.
If you have to put money on this fight, you got a gun to your head. Lawrence Fishburne's got a gun to your head. Who do you take?
If I had to, I'd go Joanna, but I really wouldn't like to pick.
All right, Michael. Keanu Reeves has a gun to your head. Who do you take?
I'm taking whoever the underdog is, but if I don't know the odds, I'm taking Joanna as well.
King. Dana White has a gun to your head. Who do you take?
Joanna.
Max. The little guy from Lord of the Rings has a gun to your head. Who do you take?
Doug Rose. Do it again.
Big Tone. The guy from Game of Thrones. The little guy. He has a gun to your head. Who do you take? This guy did the full backs on us. He did the full backs. What are you doing? You did the max on us, man. What are you doing? What is he doing?
John, who do you got?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to go with Rose. I think Rose, she's going to come out differently in this fight, and she's going to take it to the ground. I think she's going to take it to the ground, and she's going to submit Joanna in this fight. I don't think that she's going to play that game the second time, because I believe Joanna thinks that she's going to come out and try to do the same thing, and that's not going to happen. Tone, are you back?
You guys can't read lips?
Man, we're not sign language specialists.
I was clearly saying Thug Rose, Thug Rose.
Oh, we couldn't hear you because you did the max. That's the new thing now. That's the
I figured you
max.
could read lips, though. I
No,
thought you
we
could read
can't.
lips. No?
No.
All right.
We can't even see your lips because your mustache is covering everything up.
What? I don't know what you're talking about.
Your beard is like glorious, so we can't see anything. But anyways, seems like everybody's kind of split. You know, I'm saying Rose, Tone saying Rose. Who else was going with Rose? Max?
Max.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and everybody
Rose.
else seems like they're going with Joanna. So, you know,
That's
that
3 and
shows
3.
you, huh?
That's 3 and 3 is 50-50.
Exactly. So that shows you that this fight is so close that it's hard to call, man, and that's what makes it so exciting and more interesting than the main event. But the main event is still interesting because you got Khabib, right, versus Tony Ferguson. Now, this fight, I'm gonna start with Tone. You said earlier that you know what's going to happen. Break it down. What's going to happen?
What's going to happen is Khabib is going to eat Ferguson's best shots because he doesn't have a shaky chin like some people believe. He's going to take him down. He's going to pound on him. He's going to pound on him some more. He's going to take him down again. He's going to talk some shit to him while he's pounding on him on the ground. And then he's going to get the TKO finish sometime in the 3rd or 4th round or the submission, just basically by grinding him the fuck out.
Max, do you think that Ferguson's ground game, especially off his back, is going to be something that he will be able to use against such a pressure grappler like Khabib?
Those 10th Planet guys are tricky. They're really scrambly, and they use their legs and their limbs well. But Khabib just seems like he's on another level. And I got to agree with Tone. It seems like he's going to be able to get this fight to the ground at will and be able to inflict some ground and pound. The only thing I have a little bit of hesitation with picking against Ferguson is the 5-round fight. And we know Ferguson's never going to be out of the fight no matter what. Trains at elevation year round. And we've seen him pull off submissions late in fights too. So tough matchup to call him in a lean Khabib. But to answer your question, John, no, I don't think that that 10th Planet lanky jiu-jitsu is going to really have too much of an impact here.
King, will Khabib make weight?
Yes, because I'm going to this event and I don't want to have spent money like many others did to see this and then have it not happen. So I'll make sure he makes it.
Again.
But
are you on his team? Are you gonna be doing the bath for him? Are you pouring the water into the tub?
I'm just the guy that makes the hats, man. What's a king without a crown, right? So
Exactly.
Yeah, but anyways, as far as the matchup goes, it's a great one. I obviously both guys are really elite. This is about as good of a title fight as you can get, or excuse me, good of a fight as you can get. Without the reigning champion entering the fight. So I don't know who I'm gonna pick.
You got to pick somebody. Come on.
I'm gonna go with Khabib. You know, this is the first time I picked him. If you go back in history and time to the archives of my old MMA Kings podcast when I used to do predictions with like 6 listeners, I picked Ferguson every single time. And this one, man, after the Barboza fight, I can't pick against him.
Then, Europe is probably behind Khabib. Are you behind Khabib, or are you in front of him?
No, Khabib's got this. I think it's going to be much like the Barboza fight, just with Ferguson trying to punch him rather than kick him. I think it's going to be exactly like 3 fights. Sure, Ferguson's always dangerous with his stamina and cardio, but like Khabib's no mug himself. He can easily go the full 25 minutes if required. But much like Tone said, and I never thought I'd agree with him so much in my life, but I think the finish in the 4th is going to Khabib.
All right, Michael, what's the news around the cafeteria table with this fight? Tell us what's going down.
Yeah, I think we're all split. You have people who think that Khabib's going to go out there and dominate, and then you have the people who think that Ferguson's unorthodox attack is going to give him the advantage and do what no man has ever done, which is defeat Khabib Nurmagomedov. In my opinion, my brain says Khabib, but my gut's saying Tony Ferguson. I think Tony Ferguson does something that a lot of opponents don't do with Khabib, which is attack off the back rather than trying to get up. And I think it poses new problems for him. So my brain says Khabib. I think he dominates it. But something's telling me that Ferguson's going to pull it off.
Max, did you make a prediction?
Official prediction, I'm going to go with Khabib 4th round TKO.
All right, official
John,
prediction. King, you
what do you
said
got?
Khabib, right? What do you think? How does he finish this?
Yeah, I think, that was kind of my main thought, what Michael said, going into the other fights where Ferguson works off his back so much. But, I think Tony puts himself in bad positions to get good ones. And I just don't know if Khabib's going to be able to allow him to do that. So I'm going to say Khabib, I'm going to say it goes the distance. I'm going to, probably be in the minority there, but I'm going to say 5 rounds, Khabib by unanimous decision.
Tone, how about you, man?
I think I already said, I guess I have to pick a specific round, the 4th round submission, I guess, just to be different. But, I don't know, because Hunter on Twitter had a very good point that if Tony Ferguson could just get up, off of his back, that he could win this fight,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's very true. Like, if he could just not get taken down, he could also win this fight. So if he doesn't get taken down and also gets back to his feet, then he should win. It's that simple.
Ben, what's your final prediction? Did you say?
Khabib TKO on the 4th.
Okay. What I think is going to happen is Khabib is going to have a bad weight cut, but he's going to make weight. But it's not going to be good. He's going to struggle, and that's going to affect him in the fight. And he's not going to have the best cardio because of this. And he's had bad weight cuts many times before. And Ferguson's just going to kind of play possum for the first few rounds. I believe that Ferguson submits him in the 5th, but he loses all 4 rounds before that. I think that's what will happen. That's just
the flaw in your logic, though, is if Khabib has a bad weight cut, he won't fight.
even a second time for the title?
It doesn't matter. Him and his team, if he has a bad weight cut, he is not fighting. I can tell you that.
Well, ACB has their doors.
That's how he's undefeated. He doesn't make stupid decisions like that. If he has a bad weight cut, he's not going to go out there and put himself at risk. So.
Yeah, I don't think. That's not going to be good for Khabib. But hey,
or Nolan. It won't be good for Nolan either.
Yeah, Nolan's going to be fucking in the hotel with the machine gun going crazy out there. That's what's going to happen. Khabib, make the weight. Nolan doesn't want to go all nuts on you, man. Come on. Dr. King doesn't want to have to kill you and then, like, bring you back. You know what I mean? So, anyways, now, before we take off, end this show, is there anything else that's kind of like that you see in this card or a fighter that we haven't talked about? Actually, I think that there's one matchup, because we have a few minutes left, is the Michael Chiesa versus Anthony Pettis matchup that we didn't talk about, right? So let's kind of like delve into that a little bit. Tell me who you pick in this fight and why they will win in like a 30-second span. We'll start with you, King.
I'm going to go with Michael Chiesa. I'm going to say he gets it done by submission. I don't know. I don't really know. Pettis, it seems like he puts on competitive fight for a round and then kind of just falters, whether he, like the last fight where Poirier kind of started beating him up and then the whole rib thing happened, or just by decision where he kind of just runs out of gas. So I'm just going to give Chiesa the benefit of the doubt. It's been a little while since we've seen him, and, I'm sure he's trying to get back in the win column.
Mr. Ben?
Yeah, I think Chiesa too, by submission. Quite early on, I think Pettis is exciting. He's got a big fan base, but I'm just not sure he's cutting it at top level. I think Chiesa gets it done in the first round, to be honest with you.
Max?
Chiesa, decision. Not too much else to say other than what's been said. I want to hear young Mike's prediction, though.
Young Mike.
I'm going to go outside the mainstream. I think Pettis takes it. There's got to be a resurgence at some point. I think he's exciting off his back so he can make it competitive, and I think his striking gets the job done. Decision.
Big Tone?
I got Showtime Pettis by a cartwheel kick off of the cage. He's going to bring back Flair. He's going to bring the Flair back into the UFC.
Yeah, I'm taking Showtime Pettis via body shots. Body shots. That's what's gonna happen. Body shots. Because Michael Chiesa's torso is just too long.
I mean, what is Michael Chiesa's mom gonna think about that?
Hey, man, it's gonna be terrible. He's not gonna get a shout out. That's what's gonna happen. But yeah, man, this card's gonna be crazy. It was good talking to you guys. Definitely have you guys back on. Yeah, peace.
Thanks.
Yeah.